happy crafters, this video goes in conjunction with my video on making a plywood flower box with our Glowforge Aura. So if you're here, you're probably wondering how to set up a file to be a true pass-through file with the Glowforge Aura, whose pass-through slot is pretty much manual. So to be able to use pass-through with the Glowforge Aura, you do have to have your file set up correctly. It either needs to be set up as a pass-through file with the cuts in the right place, or you'll need to be able to do it yourself. If you made that project, you may have come from over there to this video so you can learn how to set up your file correctly, or you might just be a Glowforge Aura user who's looking to utilize your pass-through slot with your Glowforge Aura with any file that you find on the internet or make yourself. So in this video, we're going to cover how to use Inkscape to turn any SVG file into a pass-through slot file compatible with the Glowforge Aura. If you have no idea what I'm talking about with the flower box project, then once you watch this video, you may be inspired to go create your own plywood flower box that has interchangeable letters and is a great seasonal project. It's also a really great sellable project if you are a crafty business owner. They have a really high profit margin and they sell very well over on Etsy and on other online platforms. So I highly suggest you check out that video next if you didn't come from that video, because it's a really fun project to make with your Glowforge Aura, and I promise you will want to make a million of them. Without further ado, let's hop on over to the computer. I'm going to show you how to make any SVG file into a pass-through compatible file. Okay, so here we are in Inkscape. If you've never used Inkscape before, you can download it online. It is a free tool to use, so you can just go to inkscape.com, download it compatible with whatever device you use. And then the first page you're going to see is your kind of main canvas here. And if you haven't imported your file yet, let me show you how to do that really fast. You just select this little import button in our top menu and then select your file that you want to import. I've imported my mini flower box file that I purchased from Hydrangea Creations Co. on Etsy, and I'm using the 0.125 inch version of her flower box tutorial that is compatible with the wood that I'm going to be using for this project. Now, while this is a pass-through project, it's set up more for the Glowforge Pro, where you can kind of do more automatic pass-through, but I'm cutting mine on my Glowforge Aura, which means I need to do a little extra work so that this is compatible with its manual pass-through slot. So that's what we're talking about today. Let me kind of give you a little bit of the lay of the land here. I'm going to zoom out just a smidge. You can see that I have 3 sheets of wood that I'm going to be working with. So here's sheet number 1, it's 12 by 20. Here's sheet number 2, also 12 by 20. And then here is sheet number 3, also 12 by 20. So you can understand what these pieces are. This piece right here is the front of our flower box, and this is the top. This piece here is the back, and this little inset line is going to be a score line on our project, and then this is the bottom or the top, doesn't really matter. These two are the same, bottom and top. And then on our third sheet of wood, we'll be cutting the sides of our box, and then the little inset pieces on the top and bottom and the sides here. These 2 little rectangles are actually scrap pieces, so they won't be used for anything unless I mess something up, in which case we might want them. We're gonna go ahead and cut them anyway. All of these pieces though, I have my dimensions here on my table next to me, but this front piece is 10.75 in width and 15 inches tall. So the Aura print bed is 12 by 12, so I know that this piece is too big. I'm gonna have to cut it into multiple pieces so that I can have a pass through on my Aura, and that's what we're focusing on. The first thing we wanna do though is ungroup everything. So I'm gonna click my topmost layer, which is the highest level grouping here. It's everything on the sheet. I'm going to right click and select to ungroup. So now I have everything broken out individually into its separate rectangles. You can see when I click, it no longer selects the whole page. It's now selecting each individual file. Okay, so now that we've ungrouped everything, we are going to start working with our individual pieces. So we know that this piece is 10.75 inches in width by 15 inches, and the Aura print bed is 12 by 12. So this is too large in and of itself. This piece will be fine to cut, but I know that I need to basically turn each of these 12 by 20 pieces of wood that we have here into 2 separate cuts. The first thing I'm gonna do is a little housekeeping with my file management. This seems like an overkill step, but I promise in a minute when we start chopping these up, it's going to be 100% worth it. I'm gonna click on my individual pieces here, and I'm gonna name them by what they are. So now that I've clicked on this, I can see it's highlighted in my layers panel. I'm gonna double click it to rename it. Yes. Can't remember how to do that. And I'm going to tell myself that this is the front, and then I'm gonna just collapse that. I'm gonna do the same down here. This is the top. And then this, remember, is two separate pieces, but I'm gonna try to select the outermost one first. This one is the back inset score line. This guy is our bottom. I'm gonna go back to my little chart that shows all my different pieces so I can really get this right. So we're gonna label every piece. Oh, those were the sides. My bad. Bottom and top are actually side 1 and side 2. This is bottom and top. Bottom, top. And then we have all of our little pieces here, which are our 4 back thin pieces, 4 front thin pieces, and our 2 scrap pieces. So we've got back thin, long 1, front thin, long 2. Front thin, long 1. And then we have back thin, short 2. Back thin, short 1, front thin, short 1, and front thin, short 2. And then we have 2 scrap pieces. So we're about to go grab those. I think these are just our back and our front labels, so we're not going to be playing with those as much, so I'm going to kind of collapse those, but I do want to know what they are, just so I don't mess with them. And then we're just missing our 2 scraps. So that's scrap 2 and scrap 1. So now we have everything labeled, we know what everything is, and that is about to come in handy when we start really chopping this apart, because otherwise it can get really confusing. What we want to do is take our rectangle tool right here and create a rectangle that essentially chops this piece of wood in half. Since I know that this front piece is 15 inches long, I know it has to be broken into 2 pieces, but really it doesn't have to be directly in half. Directly in half would be about, right here or so. But I really don't want to cut it right there, because then I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, 4 cut lines to match up. Whereas if I cut it more like here, I only have to worry about 2. So because of that, I'm going to cut a little below my picture window here in the front, and I'm just going to create a rectangle. I'm not really worried about how big it is. I'm only worried that each half of this piece of wood would be able to be cut on my Aura print bed, and it would, because I know just from knowing the measurements here that each of those are less than 12 by 12. So once I have an appropriately sized rectangle, I'm going to take that rectangle and duplicate it using Command C and Command V. And I'm gonna then line it up on the other side. You notice with Inkscape, it will snap into place when it's aligned, which is really handy for what we're doing right now. And each of these rectangles is going to basically show us what our 2 prints are gonna look like on our Aura print bed. So now that I have that set up, what I'm gonna set off to do is chop this up into 2 separate pieces. So first I'm going to take this first rectangle, and what we're about to do is chop up this front piece. So since we're chopping this into 2 pieces, we need 2 of them. So I'm going to take it, Command C, Command V, and I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to make sure it's aligned right on top of it. Inkscape is going to help us by snapping it into place, which is really nice. And I don't have to worry about duplicating this piece right here because it's small enough, it's not going to have to be chopped. So now I'm going to select my rectangle that I just created. So I'm going to select my rectangle on my right hand side, and I'm going to shift click the front piece that's right underneath it. And then I'm going to select path difference, and it's then going to chop it. This front piece here, actually you can see it has 2 rectangles underneath it. And one thing that we really need to make sure of is that when we're chopping, we're only selecting 2 layers at a time. So we do want to take this front piece and separate it into front window, front large. Same thing down here. We actually won't even need to chop this twice. That'll make sense in a second. So we can delete our second of this front window. We don't need 2 of those. And then we can take this and select ungroup, and we can do the same thing right here, ungroup. We want everything to be ungrouped. This is our front large 2. All right, so now we're ready to do our first chop. So we're gonna take our rectangle, we're gonna select our front piece underneath, and then we're gonna select path difference. And when we do that, we're gonna chop this in 2. We're about to do the same thing on the other side. We're gonna select our rectangle, select the piece underneath it, select the other piece underneath it. You wanna make sure you select the opposite one that you selected the first time, and then select path difference. And now you can see our rectangles are gone, but what we have is 2 pieces of our front window now. There's only one issue with this that we do have to correct before we move on to our next piece of wood, and that is that we have this line down the middle now, right here and right here. And the Glowforge is gonna wanna cut that as a line, but we don't truly want it to cut a line right there because then we would have to glue these pieces together. We just want it to know that we have to cut this in separate pieces, but we still want it to be one cohesive unit. We don't want this line here to be cut. So the way we adjust that is we select our node tool right here, select our path that we don't want to be cut by the Glowforge, and then select this button right here. It's delete segment between two non-endpoint nodes. And when I select that, you can see there's now no more cut line right there, which is exactly what we want. So we're just gonna repeat that with this other rectangle, select our little path here, and then delete segment between non-endpoint nodes. Okay, and then once we have it deleted, we can line this back up. Again, the Inkscape program should lock it into place for you. And you can even zoom in and like make sure that it's really aligned, and it looks perfect. So now our first piece of wood is done. We're gonna repeat that process for our other two pieces, and I'll explain it again. So this time it's a little bit different because we have two pieces we do have to slice through. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna do this process 4 times instead of 2. Because we do want to keep these inner rectangle and this outer rectangle separate from each other, because one of them is going to be a cut line and one of them is actually just a score line. Now, if these could be connected, like if they could be cut together, we would combine them into one piece and then we just have to do it like we did before. But this is a little different because one is a cut line and one is a score line. So we actually do want to keep them separate. I see a rectangle I did not label and I'm very confused. Oh, it's that one. Did I not label that? That is our back thin long 2. I guess I didn't label it. Let's do that really fast. We want everything to be labeled so we don't lose anything. Okay, so on to this second piece. So like I said, we're gonna have to do this in multiple parts because this inner section is a score line, so can't combine them. But we do wanna do what we did before, which is duplicate everything that we're gonna have to slice. So I just duplicated my score line, lined it up on top, and then I'm gonna duplicate my back piece, and again, line it up on top. Once everything is lined up, I can create my rectangles that I'm gonna use to slice. Really thinking through where I want it to go. For this one, it really doesn't matter as much because there's not like a spot that's gonna be easier or harder than another. So I'm just kind of headed towards the middle, and I'm gonna duplicate my rectangle and line it up. There's my rectangle, and I'm gonna select my outer piece. And I can look here in the layers panel to make sure I selected the right 2. I did. Then I'm gonna select path and difference. I'm gonna repeat on the other side, selecting my rectangle, selecting that outer piece, making sure in my layers panel that I selected the right one, path, difference. And now we have our 2 back pieces, and I can toggle them on and off to make sure that they look right, and they do. I am gonna move them apart from each other though for just a moment so that I can delete that line down the middle so that the Glowforge does not cut them apart in the end when we put this into the Glowforge. So I'm going to select my node here, select that middle spot, delete that line. I'm going to do the exact same thing over here. Now again, I'm going to move this back into line so it's adjoined there. Ooh, it really wants to join with that inset score line, which we don't want that to happen. There we go. It's wanting to adjoin with our inset line for some reason. So we're going to do it manually here. It's just snapping into the wrong spot. There we go. We got it. So now we're gonna grab 2 more rectangles and we're gonna do this score line. So I'm gonna grab rectangle, duplicate it, drag until they connect. And now we're gonna be doing the score line. So I'm gonna shift click that inset score line, path, difference. And I know this seems complicated, but really once you start doing it, once you get into it, you're gonna kind of get the hang of it and it's gonna go really quickly. And then you can really do as complicated as you want because you get in the hang of it and then it doesn't matter whether there's 4 layers or 100, you know exactly what to do and you'll get much quicker at it. So if this is feeling like a lot, have no fear. I promise you it does get easier the more you do it. I'm gonna adjoin my score lines here. That's looking nice. So again, just a reminder, we don't have to worry about these bottom pieces at all because they're just gonna be included in our second cut. They're well within the bounds of our 12 by 12 print area. We're not worried about that. We are worried about this back sheet, however, which is going to be a pain in the butt, just FYI, before we get into it. Because there are a million pieces and we're gonna have to do a lot here. So we're gonna start with this guy, our bottom. We're gonna duplicate him. We're gonna have to cut him in half for sure. Then we're gonna grab this top piece, definitely gonna have to be duplicated and cut. And now we're gonna look at these little skinny pieces kind of piece by piece because some of them are gonna have to be cut and some are. So if I look at back at my instructions here, I can see that these thin pieces, the longer ones are 14.5 inches long and the shorter ones are 9.5 inches long. So that means these shorter pieces don't need to be cut at all, but these longer pieces do. Because of that, we're gonna duplicate our long ones and align them, making sure we have them snapped into place. We're gonna skip over these short ones because they are fine. Get these other long ones really quick. And then we're gonna go slice and dice them, making sure it snaps into place right on top. And there we should be good to go. So let's grab our rectangles and get to slicing. I'm gonna do this one a little bit differently just to show you some different ways you could be doing this. I'm gonna cover my whole piece. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to get in between, if I can get it without it snapping into place. I'm gonna line it up right here and see if there's any overlap. It's okay if it overlaps these shorter ones because we're actually not gonna cut those at all. So it's only gonna matter when we're aligning on our print bed, which we should have no problem with. All right, let's start slicing this puppy. All right, I'm gonna duplicate, I'm gonna drag this one over, line it up as we have done. Let's start with our front piece here. I'm gonna click it, path, difference. I'm gonna go grab the other one, path, difference. And now we're gonna do what we've been doing, which is delete those central lines because we do not want that to get cut. Lining them back up, perfection. On to the second piece. This square or rectangle, whatever it is, doesn't have to be in exactly the same spot as the other, but I am gonna line it up as best I can. You can see that Inkscape's gonna help me out and tell me where that cut is. That's just gonna make it easier to align in the end because remember that this is all one sheet of wood. So we're just trying to make future us, our lives a little bit easier. So I'm gonna put those cuts in the same spot. Now I'm selecting this piece, slicing it, doing the same thing again, moving them apart, grabbing the node, deleting that central line there because we do not want that to be a cut. Then I'm gonna take my cursor and push them back together. This is where it's gonna get a little tricky on you because it doesn't know what you wanna snap it to. So see how it's snapping to that upper piece. You don't want that, so I'm gonna just manually drop it down and make sure it's connected. Okay, now let's go grab these smaller pieces. So we got 4 more. Again, looking for where it snaps into place. It's telling me it's about right there. That's where it's snapping. So it could be snapping on something else, but that's okay. We know that this is all gonna fit in one spot and that's great. Grabbing this, path, difference, grabbing this, and this, path, difference. So now we're gonna delete that middle path, same thing over here, and then dragging them back together. Again, this is a little tricky sometimes if it's trying to snap to a different piece, but it did a great job. Let's do it again. Looking for that cut. It's telling me it's right there. That doesn't feel right, but we'll go with it. I am gonna grab it from the other side though. I've been making my rectangle from over here, so let's at least keep that consistent. I don't know why I'm questioning that that's really where I've been cutting this whole time, but we'll find out later. All right, click, click. Checking in my layers panel again to make sure I've selected the right 2 things as we get into these more complicated sections, and then deleting that central line. So you can see we're kind of getting in a rhythm on this. It does indeed get a little monotonous when you have these complicated files, but this is how we turn it into a true Aura pass-through project. Continuing on, so we're gonna grab our rectangle, front, thin, long, 2, difference, rectangle, there it is. Moving it apart, grabbing those nodes, delete, same thing over here, delete, and bringing them back together. I believe we got everything. So we're just gonna check that we have 2 of everything we need to have 2 of before we go put this in Glowforge. And I will show you how we do that before I end this video, but then if you wanna see me do the rest of the project, definitely hop over to my other video where I actually create this flower box and assemble it. We should have 2 front pieces, front large 1 and front large 2. Looking good. We should have 2 back pieces. I didn't label them 1 and 2, but I can see here it's back, and then 2 score lines back and back. Now onto this piece, we should have 2 tops. I can use my eyeball toggle visibility to make sure they're all in the right spot. Also 2 bottom pieces, great. And then we should have 2 each of our thin long pieces for the front and the back. So we have front long thin 2, front long thin 2, front long thin 1. I think I duplicated this and forgot to slice it. So let's go slice that one really fast. My bad. Sorry, Charlie. So we are now slicing front thin long 1. Okay, so that's this one. And we'll go grab the other one. Okay, now let's look at these again really quick because we should have front thin long 1, front thin long 1, front thin long 2, front thin long 2, back 1, back 2, back 1, back back too. Okay, that looks fab. Everything is duplicated correctly. Everything looks great. So now we're ready to export this whole file and throw it back into Glowforge. So one thing I'm gonna do really quick is I'm gonna group everything so it all stays together when I bring it into Glowforge here in a second. And then I'm going to right click and select group. So now everything's in a group together. Okay, so now that we have everything grouped here in Inkscape, we are ready to export this project. So we're gonna go to File, Export. So we could select document or selection here actually because we currently have everything selected, but we don't wanna select page, which would be only the things in the confines of this page here. And we do wanna export this as an SVG, and we're gonna select Export. You could also do this by going to File, Save As, and I could save this as Pass-Through Flower Box. I'm gonna save it to my desktop, and then I'm also gonna select a plain SVG here. And I'm select Save. Okay, so now we're gonna go to our Glowforge. Here she is. I have it zoomed way out. I'm gonna hit the plus button and select to upload. And then I'm gonna grab my pass-through SVG here that I just made. It came in a little bit the wrong size, so I'm just gonna select each piece of wood individually. And I've selected this little reposition and resize button down here. And I'm going to check what it's supposed to be dimensionally and adjust each piece. It's a little hard to see what I'm doing, but I'm gonna select this piece. There we go. I know that that front piece is supposed to be 10.75 by 15. So I'm going to change our width here to 15, and now it's 10.75, great. I know that this is the side piece and it's supposed to be 3 by 15, so I'm gonna change it to 3 by 10.25. We're gonna move it over just a smidge so it has room to breathe there. Okay, that looks good. Now we're gonna go do the same thing down here to this piece. This back piece is supposed to be 10.75 by 15, so I'm gonna change it to 15. 10.75, great. And then this is supposed to be, again, 3 by 10.25. So I'm gonna change it to 3. These are each supposed to be 3 by 15. So I'm gonna change the width to 15 because they're both supposed to be the same. That's correct. Let me grab all these little guys here, move them just down. And then I can move this back into place. We are gonna get these lower pieces here to be the right size. So each of these skinny pieces, the long ones are 0.35 by 14.5. So 14.5 for all these long ones. So we're gonna grab each one individually here. I'm gonna make them all the right size first and then we'll position them correctly. I'm gonna line all these up, make sure we have space in between. We should. I gotta go change the little ones too. Can't forget this. The back, top, and bottom thin pieces are supposed to be 9.55. So then we have our little scraps here, which should be 0.35 by 4. So this is front 9.75 by 0.35. All right, let's line both of those up. Now it's just these guys left that I need to fix. So these are our scraps. Yeah, 0.35 by 4. We're gonna bring those down, get them out of the way. Oh, okay, apparently I'm gonna resize it by accident. Bringing it down here. We're gonna take these, and these are supposed to be our back, top, and bottom thins. They are 0.35 by 9.5. Let's line these puppies up. Make sure we got some space in between. All that's looking great. Okay, everything's the right size now. So let's make sure our cuts that we imported from Inkscape are still there. And then we will be ready to get this thing cut. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna select my little box here. I'm gonna select ungroup. I'm gonna make sure, oh, yes, perfect. Okay, so it is still slice and dice just how we want it. The next thing I need to do is set my cut settings. So that is how you make a project, a true pass-through project with the Glowforge Aura using Inkscape. As you can see, it's a little bit of a tedious process. We did it on a very challenging file. So your file is probably a lot easier. You may just have 1 or 2 cuts to make. We made several because this is a large and complicated project. But I hope this really helps you understand how when we're making a project, a pass-through project with Glowforge Aura, we're really just telling the Glowforge where to split it and then making sure we're not cutting that internal line. We're just cutting 3 out of the 4 sides, and then we'll be placing it together with our Glowforge. So I have my project in Glowforge now. I'm ready to get cutting and make this flower box project. If you want to see the whole project, jump over to the other video where I create this in real life so you can see it all come together. But I hope you enjoyed this. I hope this helps you create your pass-through projects in the future. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Hit that little bell icon. I love making crafty tutorials and projects here on this page, and I'd love to have you join me for them. You can also follow me anywhere at It's Laura Lambert you like to watch social media. Connect with me there, shoot me a DM, tell me what you're crafting. I would love to hear from you. And in the meantime, I'm gonna go make this flower box, so I will see you back here next week. But until then, happy crafting.